Bulls Gold is delivered to you via the Barroom Network, now in its 7th year of providing podcasts about Chicago sports, movies, and more. Make sure to subscribe to the Barroom Network for free and easy downloads of its programming, and visit its merchandising store at deepdishtees.com to purchase t-shirts, hoodies, and mugs. Now, on with the show.
Hey, welcome to Bulls Gold here on the Barroom Network. I'm Edward Schuler, joined by Salim Suterwalla. Salim, how are you doing today, man?
Hey, Ed, I'm doing great. Bulls have been playing better since we last recorded. They did have, obviously, that one frustrating loss against the Rockets, but yeah, they've been playing better. Obviously, Zach is looking great. So I'm doing not bad. I'm less. I mean, I'm not saying I'm all back in or anything with this team. It's still this team. I'm still like, I don't know what will happen as the season goes on, but I think I'm pretty certain the Bulls absolutely will not rebuild because of the fact that the East is so weak that they could still make the playoffs as is, and still, even if they get a couple of play-in games, I think ownership will probably be happy with those 2 extra games for revenue purposes, probably. So that I'm thinking is what's the reality. But yeah, I mean, like I said, it's good to see the Bulls playing better overall, and it's also really nice to see Zach pretty much looking like his normal self.
Yeah, we said before the home and home against the Knicks that the Bulls needed to go 7-3 to close out the year for us to really buy back into them. And it started ugly with the 2 losses to the Knicks, and then they lost to the Timberwolves without Towns and Gobert. But
yeah, I gave up 150 doing
150 professional basketball points in 4 quarters to as our guy Big Dave said, Nas Reed. And he said some guy named Knight. Who's that? But yeah, the Bulls have won 5 of 6 since that loss to Minnesota. So I don't know if that was a wake-up call or what, but, I mean, they've beaten Miami on the road. They got a little bit of payback against the Hawks and Knicks. Like you said, the loss against Houston, which was pretty bad. But then they beat Milwaukee Wednesday, and then beating Detroit Friday. So they're back in the picture. A playoff berth is still very much realistic. And like we were talking about before the show, it's hard to see this team choosing to rebuild when a playoff appearance is still very tangible. And Zach LaVine, the guy that you just invested so much money into, still in the prime of his career, is starting to show signs of life. So They have a really tough stretch coming up now, with starting tonight, Cleveland in back-to-back games, but not on a back-to-back. So tonight they play Cleveland. Monday they're at Cleveland, then Brooklyn, then Philly, then Utah, then Boston, Washington, Oklahoma City, Golden State. So it's a pretty challenging stretch. So I'm still not like you. I'm not buying in because we know how this team has operated. And it just seems like they are just going to play at the level of whoever they're playing against.
Right, for sure. There's a few things that we'll definitely discuss here. As far as obviously we got a Lonzo Ball update. We have to look at what the Bulls can do. Obviously, with the schedule you just mentioned, it's coming up, which I have thoughts on that obviously as well. And then we do have a really good interview as well with Bulls radio announcer Chuck Swirsky that we will have played later in the episode. So definitely stick around for that if you're listening right now. Um, but yeah, so let's get into all that other topics. First let's talk about a little bit about Lonzo update before we get back into looking at the schedule that coming up with the way the playing some of the tougher teams and even with the Bulls playing better. But yeah, the Lonzo update was. I guess it's positive in the sense that it's better than what he's been doing. Like he's been able to, even like they said, what he was lightly able to jump and he was lightly able to jog. But like for me, it was still like, man, it's been almost a year, and now he's finally able to lightly jog and lightly jump. I don't like to me, it doesn't really mean a lot because or mean much because I'll feel like, oh, okay, cool if Lonzo played a pickup game and had no like pain afterwards. That's when I'll feel good. Like, oh, okay, he played it actually like scrimmage, like something like that. Not necessarily a huge 5-on-5 like with the team and then real practice, but just like did like a run and was able to play without. And then after the next day, he had no soreness in his knee, like or like real pain. Like you expect there to be some kind of I don't know if there's like soreness is the right word because you probably expect some kind of like soreness, like as far as because I haven't done this in a year, so I'm probably gonna be tired. But like pain, I guess is probably the correct word. More pain is in his knee the next day. Like you would hope that there's nothing like that, and then he has to sit out like, oh, I can't practice again for another 2 months because I can't. This every day now that I try anything it hurts. So I think something like that will get me more excited. Like he's able to scrimmage, or something like that, than what this current update was. Like, what were your thoughts though on that update?
Yeah, so I think it's good news, but it's not a whole lot. Like you said, like it's great. You'd rather see this than he's still not doing anything and all hope is lost or something like that. But yeah, it's good news, but it's not like you want to see him getting back into those basketball like activities more. Like you want to see, we're waiting to see the scrimmages and taking contact and not feeling pain after workouts and things like that. So it's welcome news, but it's not what we really, really want to see. And at the same time, I still can't shake off the possibility that regardless of what happens, that he's still not going to come back this season.
Yeah, I've long given up that thought that he's coming back this year. I just can't see it.
Yeah.
It's going to be January and he's still not even, like I said, he hasn't even had a like scrimmage run or anything like that. Like,
yeah. So it's like
there's just no way. There's no way he's playing this season. It's out of the question, I think, to me. And it would basically have to be something where a miracle happens, where he wakes up next week sometime and he's just like, man, my knee feels amazing and I can play now.
So would you
something like that?
If you were AK or whoever, I mean, I'm sure the call is going to come from ownership, and it's going to be a mix of ownership and AK and Eversley. So I'm sure it's like a talk amongst multiple people. But if it comes down to you, and Lonzo Ball wakes up like in say March, like you said, and just comes and says, "Look, I feel great. I'm at full strength. I played like I've done everything that you want to see. I'm ready to play basketball." And the Bulls are, I won't give a number record wise, but let's say they're still around. They're still doing what they are kind of now, which is kind of like a tread water type of record. So maybe like 3 or 4 games below 500, I guess. Like still a puncher's chance. Would you let Lonzo play, or are you kicking that rock or kicking that can towards next season?
Oh man, it's tough. Like I mean, if he's not, I mean, I'm imagining if he's saying he's ready to play, like, or if the team is saying that he's ready to play because he's probably went through multiple rounds of testing his knee in practice and all these other things. Yeah, you probably bring him back. Um, and if they're still, I mean, if they're still in the playing reach, they're probably like playing um territory. I'm sure they'll still try to do that. What I want to see, realistically, is if I think the Bulls should just announce that he's not playing the season and then apply for an exception, disabled player exception, because that's something they could, potentially use to sign another player that could help this season. Because they still have the mid-level exception, like the full mid-level and whatever prorated that would be. And then if they can get that exception too, I know you can't combine those two, but it's still money, extra money here or there. That, and I don't know how the cap. Obviously, I'm not a CBA guy, so I don't know how that works. I don't know if the disabled player exception would then take money off like the cap, and then so then you're not going into the luxury tax territory if you have to use it. So maybe that's something, also another benefit where the Bulls then can actually go sign somebody and not worry about luxury tax payments because his ownership won't pay the luxury tax. So I don't know if that also could come into play. Maybe if something like that happens, I can't remember. But yeah, I mean, to me, it's like I think if that situation you kind of drew out, I think yeah he would come back this season. And if he is, it's not because I don't think that situation comes about unless he's actually for sure ready to play, because they're not gonna. I don't think is going to just go out there to play if his knee isn't actually good, like he hasn't been properly tested multiple amounts of times, and the team isn't going to let him play if his knee is not actually tested multiple amount of times and they feel confident about it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think I wonder that even if he is ready to play, how much of a contributor he can actually be. Even if it's like 10 minutes, I say, like 10 or 12 minutes, I don't know. Like, I don't know what a 10 or 12 minute Lonzo Ball still looks like. And
yeah, I mean, it depends on how his movement is. Like, I suppose he could, like, I would just worry more so defensively, like, how is he able to move, like, laterally and things like that. I mean, I suppose he'll help with shooting because he's like he's a good standstill shooter.
Yeah.
But as far as what he can do defensively is the question, I think, right?
Yeah.
Because again, the mobility wise, like how mobile will he be able to be on that knee?
He's going to see a lot of pick and roll.
Right, exactly. So I guess that's the question. Yeah, it's a tough thing for sure.
Yeah. So we'll see if we get any more positive updates in the next couple of months with Lonzo. But I think we're both in agreement here that it's good to read, but it's still kind of not that meat and potatoes that we really want to see to figure out if there actually is a legitimate chance, or if this is just something that they know in the back of their mind it's not happening this year, but they want to leave that door cracked open just for some optimism and just for some hope and just for a little bit of good vibes. So we'll see what that's looking like over the next couple of months. Last night, the Bulls, as we talked about, beat Detroit 132-118. I did not see this game, so your thoughts are going to be a lot more meaningful than mine. But one of the things that and everyone's been talking about is how this Bulls team is showing up against these like bad opponents. And it's not like the Bulls themselves are like these world beaters, but if you look at the record, the Bulls are maybe a few wins against bad teams away from probably being a legitimate playoff team in the Eastern Conference right now, which is kind of a scary thought. So the fact that they were able to get this win when it looked kind of like a typical letdown, I think was good. So what did you notice in this game? And obviously Zach LaVine had a killer game, but what did you notice in this game from how this team played that's something that they can maybe carry over to playing similar type of opponents? I know that's kind of a weird question, like how do you beat bad teams, but like what is something that you notice in how they played and closed this game out that they can really take and build momentum off of?
Well, the closing of the game, man, Caruso was a huge part of how they were able to kind of separate themselves from the Pistons, because he played some tremendous defense on the nail, like really essentially breaking up anything the Pistons wanted to run, and then obviously getting deflections, steals, getting the Bulls then able to get on the fast break. And then offensively, the Pistons just had these major breakdowns defensively. That is, for the Bulls offensively, for their success, the Pistons had some major defensive breakdowns. And, to the Bulls' credit, they were able to execute out of when the Pistons tried to trap. Guys started shooting better. Like AC hit an open corner three, Vooch hit an open corner three. So that's how they were able to separate themselves. But like the start of the game was kind of the same frustrating situation where a team that is like an inferior opponent essentially that's coming in and playing harder than them to start. The first quarter started out like that, and the game was pretty close for the most part, and the Pistons actually had the lead a little bit. They kind of, with the lead kind of flipped back and forth a couple of times. And then, like I said, late in that fourth quarter, I'm going to say maybe like the last five minutes or so is when the Bulls kind of separated themselves. But yeah, I mean, it was a win. It's good that they won, and it's good that they were able to close out, but there were still some, in the beginning, concerning aspects. The big positive throughout the game, though, was Zach. Like, he was just, like, the vintage Zach that we've known the last, like, 2 years when he's healthy. There's the ridiculously tough shot making, the eye-popping athleticism, the first step. Last night, actually, I was on... during the game, the guys from Lockdown Pistons had asked me, because they do a live game coverage, and they asked me to join them. And like even they, like as not fans of the Bulls, they were just admiring Zach's like shot making, and that's when like he's back. Like Zach is back. You look at his December month numbers. Which I've highlighted through 14 games. He's averaging right now through 14 games of this month, 25 points, 0.2 points per game, 4.3 rebounds a game, 4.1 assists on shooting splits of 53, 43, 82%. and that's also including a 61% true shooting percentage. And the big one here is, and he's finishing at 79.5% in the restricted area. So that kind of shows you his explosion is back. So yeah, he's that same old Zach. And when you look at it too, he's at what now, 2 40-point games this month. So yeah, it's been great. And again, on the other positive, I'll say though too, I shouldn't say Zach was the only positive. The other positive, again, it's the big three being consistent. Like
Yeah.
consistent production from the big three as well.
Yeah, we've seen a lot more games with them all. Like, even when you think about last year, there were a lot of games where maybe it was one or two of them playing well, but recently we've seen more games with them all really kind of contributing to a balanced effort. And I do think that's one of the improvements that we've seen this season. And Zach having such a great December and looking like he's back has been such a really big part of that. So if this big three is playing like a legitimate trio, then the Bulls have more chances to win games and to compete. And, we saw it in that Milwaukee game where obviously it took like a big comeback at the end, but you see it in the Milwaukee game, you see it in the game against the Knicks where when they're playing well, they can compete with any team. So it's simple and obvious, but you need your best players to play like your best players. And they're finally getting that. And if Zach LaVine and DeMar can really start being that like duo like they did last season too, I mean, you really do have a shot to run it up a little bit now.
Yeah, 100%. Like, yeah, I think when you look at even the duo as far as what they've done this month, um, it's been pretty fantastic as far as a combined month from them. I think I highlighted Zach's numbers, I should say, what he's doing, and then DeMar on top of that is averaging 26.6 points a game on shooting splits of 51. I mean, the 3-point shooting is 22%, which whatever. He's not a volume shooter anyways, and 89% on the free throw line. And obviously all the other things that he does on the floor as a playmaker. So yeah, that's like the ideal scenario, like the two duo being that consistently that high, of being that good, and then everything around them kind of settling in. And I'm hoping Io can start being consistently good, better, because he's kind of had a rough season, in my opinion. I think we've seen Pat make strides. Still at times he hesitates his shot with his confidence with his shots, but like defensively, he's been strong. Like against the Bucks, like Giannis is Giannis. He's a beast. He's a monster. He had 45 points, but like he had to work for those 45 points. He got up with like 39 shots to get to those 45 points. I think you do like to see a little more aggression from him on the boards. I kind of want to give him a leeway for the Bucks game, just because it's kind of hard when you're defending Giannis to then also to crash the boards after you've taken a Giannis shoulder straight in the middle of the chest.
Yeah.
It's like, taking a Giannis shoulder can make a civilian see the light. I'm not gonna sit here and say, okay, well, he should have defended Giannis and then also gone and grabbed the rebound. That's tough. Like, and I'm not saying that every possession he was on Giannis. I think he was the biggest. He defended Giannis the most that night. And in general, he defends the best or the most difficult matchup every night. I think I had shared another stat yesterday from B-Ball Index, and they showed like the minutes leaders as far as when they are, as far as who is leading the league in like matchup difficulties, if you will. And like the league leader is wing stoppers in our matchup difficulty metrics, minimum 500 minutes. And Patrick Williams is fourth on that list. So he's taking the best like defensive assignment every night.
Yeah. And that's, I mean,
Basically.
that's no easy, like you said, that's no easy task. And we saw some signs of it even in his rookie season when he defended like I think it was like that opening stretch in his like first month where he like guarded like LeBron and Giannis like in some pretty like in like pretty short stretches. Like the fact that he's being able to do this with this workload is really just another confirmation of the type of upside that we've been talking about him the last week or like the last couple of weeks. And you know, even if the scoring numbers aren't completely there, it does feel like there is it does feel like, and it is like clear that there is improvement in his game and that we're starting to get closer and closer to really hover around what he can really look like when it's all said and done. So like I'm encouraged by it.
No, 100%. Like I said, the defense is very nice to see. The offense, I think it's just going to be a slow process, mostly because he just doesn't get. I mean, there's two things with the offensive side. So one is he just doesn't get a lot of on-ball opportunities. He's not going to because he has three high usage players on his team that come first. And then two, he does still a little bit hesitates. He thinks too much sometimes, or thinks too much, and not as much as he used to. Like he doesn't have as many moments because for example, against the Bucks, he got up 14 shots. Like he was looking to shoot, but there were a couple of moments where he's like, "Dude, why didn't you just shoot that instead of trying to take a more difficult shot?" Like he ended up. It was like twice where he did shoot, but it was like he kind of dribbled into a more difficult shot instead of taking the easier one. So like he had one point at the top of the key, 3-pointer he was open at. He faked that and drove into the Bucks' defense for some reason. Another one I remember noting is when he was coming off the dribble and he had opened up space for himself in the mid, like at the free throw line, where he could have just risen up, taken the mid range shot. But for some reason, he decided to head fake and then tried to go underneath to make a more difficult lay in, and he missed the shot. And it's like, dude, you had the midi right there. Why didn't you just shoot that? So like I think he still like second guesses himself in certain moments, in that respect. But yeah, like I said, I'm happy. I'm personally happy with the progress we're seeing from him. I call people who overly criticize him our box score merchants that just want to look at his box score and just kind of analyze his play based on that alone. But yeah, like to me, like I'm seeing good things from him. And I'm not saying like in hindsight he was the perfect pick at 4. Obviously, he isn't. There's guys, namely Halliburton, should have been the 4th pick if we're going by hindsight. But yeah, I'm still optimistic about Pat's future, and I can still see him becoming a high level role player in the vein of a guy like maybe Jeremy Grant, but a better passer.
Yeah, I mean,
if you will.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think at the time there was a lot of. I think after like those first 3 picks in that draft, there was a lot of kind of like players lumped together, and then even now when you look at it, it's like Pat, Okoro, Okongwu, Killian Hayes, Toppin, Avija, Jalen Smith, then you get like Devin Vassell. So it's just like Halliburton goes at 12, but it's like at the time no one was saying like, yeah, man, Halliburton is going to be a 21 and 10 point guard. Like that's his that's his upside in his 3rd or 4th year. He's going to reach that. But yeah, I think when you look at Pat and his improvements, it goes well beyond the box score this year. And I think as his role expands offensively in the future, and it will at some point, I think he'll be more comfortable with his shot selection. It will be more instinctive, and you won't see him passing up as many looks. Real quick, what do you think about how Vooch has done this season? Like, you look at Vooch's number, you don't really see him on the timeline as much. Like, I don't really see a whole lot of people throwing stones at Vooch these days. Like, he's been having a really great December. Like,
he's been having a good season in general.
A good season in general,
there's not much to complain about for Vooch. Look, yes, the trade is still a negative in the Bulls' favor. It is what it is. I mean, but he's been like he is a quality starting center. You know, he's providing shooting. He's facing the floor. He gets on the boards. His defense is not nearly as bad as people make it out to be. I wouldn't even say bad. He's just like, obviously we always talk about it. He's limited defensively. He's good in shorter spaces. Obviously this season the Bulls have been doing a little bit more stuff with him, having him defend higher on the level of the pick and roll and things like that. But yeah, it just, he's been the most consistent Bull, or at least one of the most consistent Bull outside of DeMar. Like from the start of the season, he's just been consistently providing production, doing good things out there, and then obviously he's still a good offensive hub on this team.
Yeah.
So
the 3-point shooting coming back for him was it's been such a really good development for him. He's like taking close to 5 threes a game, and this year he's knocking them down at like 38%. So getting that back has been great. And it's still weird though, because like when you look at his career, and I think we had an episode talking about this, but every other year he just seems to like fluctuate sharply between being at least an above average 3-point shooter to being like below streaky. And it's a little strange, but I'm glad that he's seen some like positive regression in that area of the season. So, getting 17 and 10 from your starting center with those shooting splits this season has been a really good sign. Like, he's been a really solid third option. So I'm glad that he is avoiding the type of criticism that he got last season and coming into this season. So shout out to Vooch for his play. So real quick, going through the upcoming schedule that we mentioned at the top of the show, and I wanted to see how you think the Bulls are going to do in this stretch. So we got about, let's call it a 10-game stretch. So we'll say Cleveland, these 2 games against Cleveland, then we have Brooklyn and Philly, Utah and Boston, Washington and Oklahoma City, Golden State, and then at Detroit. So about a 10-game stretch going through January 19th. A lot of difficult opponents, but how do you... We talked about this team needing to go 7-3 in the last stretch, and they're either going to hit 5-5 or 6-4, depending on what happens tonight. So not great, but what do you think this team needs to do in this next 10-game stretch to make you want to buy in to them again? Right now, I'm still like, even though they beat Milwaukee and they beat some other teams, I'm still like, no. But what do they need to do for you to buy in?
Can they go 6-4? Because that's what I'm trying to see, if they can go 6-4. Like, I'm looking at the teams like the Jazz at home. I'm looking at teams like the Wizards at home, Thunder at home, Warriors at home. Like, the Warriors struggle on the road compared to at home on their court. And then you have the Pistons, who again, they're a scrappy young team, but they're the worst team in the East. Like, those games should be wins.
Yeah.
So that's what, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 5 wins, and then you steal one of the games against the Sixers, Nets, Cavs, and the 2 Cavs games, and that's 6 wins.
I think 6-4 sounds about right.
That's what I
Yeah,
need to see. Like, and even then, that keeps them that leaves them only what is that? They're
it's 22 and
so they'll
23.
be just a game under 500
Yeah,
probably at that point.
and I mean, all things
Um,
considered, 22 and 23, it's. I mean, you're still at a point at 22 and 23 where you can still do something. Like, of course, we're not talking about them contending for something significant, but they're still at a point where they could finish the season in a position with an automatic playoff berth or just like right outside of it, probably like 7th seed or something like that. So, like, I think 6-4 would not be a bad outcome, even though they disappointed in the last stretch that they had. Yeah, like I'm looking at Cleveland as a split. I think if you can get one of those Brooklyn, Philadelphia wins, I think that's realistic. I think Utah at home. I think Utah at home should be a win, honestly. Like they're not playing as hot as they did to start the season. So I think
no, for sure.
yeah, so I think Utah at home is a game you have to win. Even though they have played well against Boston, I'm not expecting them to win on the road.
In Boston, you figure at some point they're gonna lose to Boston.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, so I'll give them an L there, and then after that, like beat Washington, beat Oklahoma City, Golden State, yeah, take care of business there, and then at Detroit, like, yeah, I think you can. I think this is another stretch where they can do something, but it really is going to require them not to take teams for granted. So they're going to have to show up for like the Utah game on a Saturday. They're going to have to show up for that. They're going to have to show up for Washington on a Wednesday. They're going to have to show up for Oklahoma City. Like they're going to have to, the Detroit game on a Thursday. Like these are the type of games that you have to show up for. I don't even really question if they'll show up to play against Brooklyn or Golden State or even in one of these Cleveland games. Like I think they'll be in the right mind state. It's really just looking at these teams that they have been taking for granted, these type of teams that they have been taking for granted that aren't very exciting when you look at them on the schedule, but those teams can play hard. And if they play hard, then it can be a wrap for the Bulls.
No, 100% for sure.
Yeah. So we'll see if the Bulls can. We're both saying 6-4. We'll see if the Bulls can meet that in this next 10-game stretch. All right. So we are being joined by the Bulls' longtime play-by-play announcer on radio, Chuck Swirsky. Chuck, thank you so much for joining us and making time for us today, man.
My pleasure. Thank you.
No, we really appreciate you. You're obviously a Hall of Famer. You're one of the best in the business, and you've been a part of so many great Bulls memories, but in general NBA, making some great NBA calls overall. It was actually a pleasure for me to meet you. I obviously you meet so many people, you don't remember me, but I had the pleasure of being able to get a tour at the Advocate Center, and I met you there, and it was really a pleasure, and it was a lot of fun. Like one of the best, like as a sports fan, one of the best experiences for me, just because being able to see that place and everything or the players work out at, and it was a fantastic experience.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it is a great experience. I think people really like yourself who had the rare opportunity to actually go inside and see what a training facility looks like. I mean, the players right now in this generation and in this point where the NBA, it's almost like an arms race where you build a training facility and it has all the bells and whistles. And then all of a sudden the team says, hey, guess what? We're building one and this is what we've got. It's almost like an SEC university, where you got one school in the South saying, man, look at this, we've got everything. And then like 2 years later, a donor from another SEC school says, well, guess what? So, but I love the Advocate Training Center. They've done a fantastic job. It is state of the art. and everything a player could possibly want is there.
Yeah, state of the art, and it's really cool too to see a lot of like the old school memorabilia stuff too. From like back in the days, back in the 90s. You see some of like the cereal boxes, like the Wheaties, but then also like these other really old, like the books and things like that, that are like probably like sports almanacs or encyclopedias, sports encyclopedias of the Bulls, the history of the team and things like that. So it's some really fun stuff. And yeah, like I said, just to experience that was just absolutely amazing. And I got to also shoot a little bit on the practice floor, so that was interesting.
Did you make them?
Experience as well. I did not. We all got one shot. I did hit the rim, but it rimmed out.
It's progress.
Well, I've seen a few of those at the pro level, so don't worry about
it. Chuck, you've been with the Bulls now for, I believe, 15 years or just a little bit over 15.
Yep.
15 years now. So you've seen a lot of these Bulls memories over the past 15 years. Some good times, some bad times as well. What are some of the moments to you that have like stuck out since you've been a part of this Bulls organization?
Wow, that's a great question. So I started, my first year was Derrick Rose's rookie year. And it was an amazing feeling as a broadcaster who's been doing this a long time. And I was in Toronto with Vince Carter's rookie year, Tracy McGrady's second year. Chris Bosh came in 2003 in the LeBron draft. So I love seeing young players and the impact Rose had immediately, and the fact he was from Chicago, and up until the ACL injury, how he was just destroying opponents every single night. And I mean, it was crazy. And when Derrick, his first 2 years, he's really starting to build a resume of explosiveness, where you can tell he was ready to take off from his rookie season. So then Tibbs comes in, his third season, Rose's third season in the league, and really blossoms into a great player. And Tibbs, to his credit, really gave ownership to Derrick and to Joe and to Lou and to Heinrich. I mean, I love that team. That era of Bulls ball, we can't put it on the Jordan era at all. And I'm not saying I'm doing that, because the Jordan era was on a different universe, planet, completely different Milky Way, so to speak, in space. But the era of post-Jordan basketball, that window when the players were healthy and on the same vibe, it was awesome.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you. I think, as fans, a lot of fans get stuck in the championship or bust, mentality of rooting for their sports teams. But when we look back at those Rose, Joakim Noah, Luol Deng, Tibbs teams, they really did give us some of our best memories. Like Joakim Noah to this day is like arguably easily, like, not counting MJ, but easily my favorite player in franchise history. Like, he gave everything he had on the court, like his blood, heart, and tears. Everything.
I think it's a really good question in a statement you just made. Who is the second most popular player? I'm not talking about best player. The second most popular player in Bulls history. Was it Derrick? Was it Joe? Was it Lou? You could go. I don't know.
Yeah,
is it Pippen?
It's tough. It's tough for sure, but to your point, like I said, those teams, even if they didn't win it all, they still gave us some really entertaining basketball, memorable basketball, and that's something we will always cherish and keep in our hearts for sure.
And you think about this. Let me just throw this out about Bulls history. Let's say that season under Fred Hoiberg, you had three alphas on the floor. Right. You had Wade, Butler, Rondo. And remember, even with all the issues with the three alphas and with Fred, trying to navigate his way through coaching in the NBA, the Bulls are up 2-0 in the series against Boston. Rondo breaks his hand during the second game, which they win. Let's say Rondo, that injury doesn't happen. Boston comes into Chicago, and I got to believe at least the Bulls get one of these games, and it's 3-1. I think they win that series. What happens in round two? No clue. But if they win that series, do you bring back Wade? Do you bring back Rondo? Do you not make the trade with Minnesota involving Butler? I mean, it's like crazy to think what would have happened had Rondo's hand not sustained an injury.
Yeah, and even let's say they don't win that series, but they're able to push it, have a 7-game series, like a really competitive 7-game series, that could have changed some opinions on how you proceed in that offseason. Maybe instead of blowing it up, you say, okay, well, we'll add a little bit of something to push us over the top. So yeah, you never know what happens if his hand doesn't break. So that's a great point as well. Speaking of moments in your career as well, like what would you say some of the great memorable moments for you are, like some of your favorite calls that you made, or just games that you've obviously sat on and behind the mic and experienced live in your career?
Well, when I was an intern, I saw a major league pitcher throw a no-hitter, and that was Dick Bosman of the Cleveland. At that time, they're nicknamed the Indians, now the Guardians. But he threw a no-hitter against Oakland and Reggie Jackson. And it was a Friday night in Cleveland, and I will never forget that. I mean, to see a no-hitter, a major league no-hitter in person is crazy. The 85 Bears, unbelievable. I was at the Super Bowl, and to see how one team just completely dominated the best team of the American Football Conference in New England. And the players assembled by the Bears during that era, especially, I mean, we can talk about Walter Payton, the greatest running back, maybe the greatest football player ever, okay? I get that. But on defense, when you had the Fridge, Dan Hampton, I mean, you had Steve McMichael, Richard Dent, Wilbur Marshall, Mike Singletary, Otis Wilson. You had Gary Fensick, you had Dave Durden. I mean, it was crazy. But if someone had to say the single game, it has to be Kobe's 81 game that I called with the Raptors and the Lakers at Staples. I mean, I saw a player score 81 points in a 4-quarter NBA game.
Yeah, that game is really sticks out in memory too, just because couple of games, a game or two before that, he had like 60 at the end,
yes, 60 or 62
Dallas. At the end of the third quarter. But it was like there was such a big lead, they didn't put him back in, and everyone was mad about that because he was just in such a big zone. And then against the Raptors, this magic happened, like competitive game, and he was just just on. And Jalen Rose to this day does not live that down. So that was just
he shouldn't, because I mean, I love Jalen. I love Jalen, but he'll never be thought of as a highly intense defensive player.
It is even crazier because they took Kobe out in that game with like 7 or 8 minutes left. And when he had
not 7 or 8 minutes, but after he made 2 free throws to give him 81. I mean, I remember doing that game, and the Raptors were up by 18 points. And that's why Kobe actually had to, I mean, he had to stay in the game on the floor But I mean, to see 81 points, I mean, I don't think I'll ever see that again.
Yeah. Let me ask you this question. What do you think is more impressive? Because this has always been an argument ever since he's did that 81. Kobe scoring 81 or Wilt scoring 100? Because and this is the reason I asked. Not obviously 100 is a lot is more than 81, but when you consider that Kobe as a perimeter player who didn't really play down low in the paint, shooting more jump shots and things like that. Like, to me, that's crazy impressive. A little bit more impressive than the 100. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, you know what? I think it's apples and oranges. I think it's, a situation where Wilt's era of basketball, not a lot of bigs, and he was the premier dominant player along with Bill Russell in that era. And actually the third best center. Now again, we didn't have that many teams in the NBA at that point in time in 1962 when Wilt scored 100. But the third best center in the league during that era was Johnny Red Kerr.
Right.
I mean, people look at Johnny as a broadcaster for, your generation. You only know Johnny as the broadcaster on TV during the championship bowl seasons. But Johnny was an outstanding college player at Illinois, terrific NBA player who played every day. I mean, up until AC Green, he was the Iron Man of the NBA. He would play every single, and this what's crazy. He probably had to play Wilt and Bill Russell how many times during the course of a season? 15 maybe each team.
Yeah.
I mean, it was wild. But the Kobe game was just crazy. And God bless him. I mean, it's interesting because, like, I think of Kobe quite a bit. And because on social media, someone's always doing a tweet about this day in history. And a lot of these this day in history little notations pop up with Kobe. And I'm not, it is so tragic what happened with him, his daughter, and of course the other people involved in the helicopter accident and the tragedy there and what has happened to the families, because they think about this every day, I'm sure. But I still believe the best was yet to come with Kobe Bryant, with entertainment and business and the impact he had. I'll share a story. I won't mention his name. He's a player. So, Kobe was doing this ESPN Plus series, and he would break down a player's game. So if he was going to break down Devin Booker, and I'm using that as an example, but he would break down current players in the NBA. And his IQ was so unbelievably high. And I encourage you and your viewers to see if you can go back and look at these. He would just, from the moment on the inbounds pass, I mean, he would look at, okay, that's a lazy dribble. Or, what is he doing with the ball here? Why is he going right instead of left? How come I'm not seeing him with his offhand? I'm looking at this. And so I had a player in the NBA, and they wanted to reach out to Kobe so Kobe would, look at his game on this ESPN platform. I think, this is just my opinion, I think in probably after his kids had all grown up, I think he would have been a great general manager.
Yeah, he definitely had vision and ability to build relationships around the league.
Yes.
The way he was able to connect with a lot of the newer generation players, for sure. Chuck, I know we don't have much more time. I want to, I'm sorry, did you have a quick comment? No, I was saying, I know we don't have much more time, so I just want to wrap up on this, about the current team. How would you personally describe their chemistry that you're seeing on the court? And also, why do you think they're struggling against these teams under 500? I mean, they got the win against last night against the Pistons, but overall they're 4-8 against these teams.
Yeah, and honestly, that's not acceptable, and they should be better against weaker opponents. But having said this, and again, I want to be very clear about this. You know, when what Detroit has NBA players, Houston has NBA players. So when someone says, well, you should win that game, well, if you line up the personnel and you see team A and team B, and you say to yourself, wow, team A's is loaded and team B not so much. Okay, I get that. But, you know, if you're Houston and you're Kevin Porter Jr., or you're Jalen Green, or you're Jabari Smith, and you're coming into a 22,000 in Chicago, and this is a big stage, and you've got a lot of eyeballs on you, you know, you want to bust it on that stage. And, I mean, last night, I mean, we had, a veteran like Alec Burks and Bogdanovich, but we had some young kids like Duran and Ivy, who I think are really two good pieces. They're going to play with Cade Cunningham when Cunningham gets healthy. And if they're deep in the Victor sweepstakes and get him, oh my goodness.
Yeah, but that's a nightmare scenario.
I mean, so getting back to the Bulls, I just think they lack consistency. People don't want to hear this because it sounds like an excuse, and it's not. It's a fact. It is a fact. This team misses Lonzo Ball.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
100%.
Yeah, he was a big part of what they were doing.
Huge. Yeah. And I get it. Injuries are a part of the game. Every team has injuries. Every team goes through it. But I'm talking about a devastating injury, not where, oh, he'll be back in 2 weeks or he's out 4 to 6 weeks. That happens. I can live with it. I may not like it, but I've got to live with it as a fan that it happens. Players get hurt. They get injured. Well, in the case of Lonzo, he's been out almost a year now. Right. And it is a devastating setback to the Bulls. Because if you think about three things Lonzo did well, A, he was really good defensively, okay? Yes. And this club obviously, has to step it up on the defensive end. But he was really good defensively. His vision on the floor was exceptional. So let's say Vooch grabs the rebound and either does a handoff to Lonzo or a quick snap pass to Lonzo 65 feet away. That ball is going in the front court within 2.5 seconds. How often did you see Lonzo dribble? Never.
Oh, quick decisions.
And the third element of his game, three-point shooting. He was having a career year, and he felt good. And I think he impacted Vooch on pick and rolls and DeRozan and Levine. And I think he would have been really, really good with Patrick Williams.
Yeah, and him and Caruso together, too, they were just a nightmare for opposing offenses, breaking up so many actions. Like, Chuck, I always compare them to the Mighty Ducks, the Bash Brothers. That's what I compared Caruso and Lonzo to, because they would just come in and absolutely rough up the opposing team's offensive game plan. Yeah. And it's just sad that we only got about 30 games of that. I think 30 games of that. It's
so, I mean, I don't know where all this is going. I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to speculate. And, I haven't spoken to Lonzo. So I just wish, the information you get, I get, the world gets. Yeah. Billy, addressed that with reporters on Friday, that he's doing some things, but nowhere near, where to get back on the floor. So
real quick, Chuck, before we wrap up, what is your optimism on whether this team can make the playoffs in the Eastern Conference? They have won 5 of their last 6 since that Minnesota game. things are looking better. Zach is looking like Zach again. DeMar is still DeMar. Vooch has been playing really well. So the best players on the team have been performing at the level that they need to compete. Do you think this team can make the playoffs this season?
Yes.
Okay.
I do. I think that if they take care of their own business and if they recognize matchups that they're comfortable with. For example, I like Jalen Duren. I think he's going to be a good player in this league for a long time. Terrific high school kid out of Philadelphia, Roman Catholic. Then he went to a prep school, Memphis for a year, gets drafted 13th overall. Looks like he's got some really defensive skills, rebounds, block shots to the point where he's going to get better in that department, but he can rebound. Offense, he's just turned 19 a month ago. But Vooch got to him early, and Vooch did that twist, turn, ball fake right, goes left, pivots, and jump hook. Okay. Duren has really never seen that playing ball in college or high school. He's getting probably a steady diet of that in the pros. And sometimes he's successful. Last night, I thought Vooch should have gotten a lot more touches, but LaVine was in the zone. Zach went 15 of 20, and you defer to him. I totally understand. But there are times in matchups where Vooch needs the ball in the post. And you got to keep the big man happy. You got to give him some sugar. And if the bench can do their job, and I love Drummond, I think Drummond is a great fit for this team with Dragic. They play off each other really well. But I don't think, for example, Williams and Javonte Green, they've got to elevate their games.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. I've been happy with Pat as far as like the progress he's made. I feel like he's
true. He has made progress, no question.
Yeah,
but I think he's capable of more.
Heading the right. Oh, 100%, 100%. And that's a part of a young player developing too. I feel like, it's not easy to play with guys like Zach, Vooch, and DeMar and understand especially when you need the ball in your hands to be effective. Yeah. A lot of times, he's learned how to play off of the actions and playing off of that. I think the one thing he needs to do is stop second guessing himself. I think that's what he does sometimes, and that's where he doesn't, play to his full maximum level. But yeah, definitely, I feel good about him, and he can definitely get better, and I think he will.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the view that most people share is, okay, he's starting to turn the corner. The fact that he has had some good games, he needs to be more consistent. I know he's still trying to find his place. He is 21. We have to keep that in mind. And,
right.
He's been plagued with injuries during his career. But I also look at Patrick as a guy who has an upside and he wants to get better. It's not like he's a guy that goes through the motions, because he doesn't. He's got a great work ethic. He's a terrific human being. Yeah. And so now it's up to him. And I know how hard it must be, because you got three alphas playing with Vooch, DeRozan, and LaVine. And you're trying to, look at the fact that, okay, I got the ball, but ... what do I do here? And I think that's why when they run plays on draw and kick, or they set, a place where Patrick can either create or shoot that mid-range, or in this case, he really is taking a lot of threes. So you got to take it. You got, in my opinion, in the NBA, if you have an open shot, now I'm not talking 3-pointers, because some players just can't shoot threes. But if you have an open look in the NBA, you got to take it, no matter what player. Because if you're on the floor, you're an NBA player. And if someone says, I'm giving you a 17-footer, and I'm not talking about Drummond, because he belongs near the cup, but I'm talking about a wing, a guard, in some case, centers like Vooch. If you have an open shot, you take it.
Yeah, we need to take a sprinkle of Denzel Valentine's confidence and put it in the bag.
Exactly. Denzel Valentine's confidence is the key to everything. Like, just
well, I wish Denzel the best. He's in the G League.
Oh, sure,
Boston's G League.
Definitely.
Anyway, guys, this has been great. Love talking hoops.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chuck, for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Much love.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right. Yeah, that was a great conversation with Chuck. And yeah, the world would be a better place if everyone had Denzel Valentine's confidence. Like, mix it with some like Gatorade or some Powerade and just distribute it.
Denzel's secret stuff.
Yeah, it's better than that. Should have been in Space Jam 2. Denzel's secret stuff.
Denzel's secret stuff.
Oh man! All right, Salim. Any final thoughts before we wrap up? The final Bulls Gold of 2022.
No, final thoughts. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy with Zach being back. I'm still hesitant, like I said, to be all in on this team. I'm hoping they can keep playing good basketball and find their way into thick of this playoff mix, as opposed to kind of hovering around that 10th, 11th spot. Like, ideally, if they can get into the 6th spot, obviously that would be preferable. But even get into constantly be in that 6 to 8. And then as the season goes on, you never know what happens, and they can maybe jump up a little bit and secure that 6th spot. But that's what we have to look for. And then we'll see what happens again. We'll talk about this again when we do more episodes later in 2023, because obviously the trade deadline is such a far place away from now. But it's going to be interesting to see what they do with Vooch, because like I said, there's rumors of him essentially seeming like he's not going to be back. So do you shake up the roster even in a not a complete rebuild, but in just kind of structurally do something where you maybe get a defensive center and then flip Vooch for a shooting wing? That'll be interesting. So yeah, those are kind of my final thoughts of 2022. And like I said, hopefully what we're seeing recently is a sign of an arrow pointing up for this team.
Yeah, we were talking about that with I think we were talking about that with Chris, about the different ways that the team could either retool or rebuild. And a lot of it, I think we all kind of settled more so on a path that if the Bulls were still kind of disappointing, then maybe you look at moving DeMar and Vooch, and rather than trying to trade everybody, just like a complete dynamite to the roster, So it would be interesting if the team is still the trade deadline is in February, I believe. So if the team is still under 500 or a few games back, do you move Vooch, maybe get another couple of bodies, or do you look to improve the team still? Maybe Chuck Swirsky was saying that, hey, he does think this team can make the playoffs, and that, if the players are performing the way that they are and the bench is contributing, then they can still make the playoffs. So it'll be interesting. It's a very tough decision with this team, because we know that ownership will want that playoff revenue, and the team is still in that hunt where even if they're hosting some play-in games, that's still a value to them. And if they can get into the actual playoffs themselves, and who knows what happens. He mentioned the 3 Alphas team. That team, I believe, was 41-41 or 42-40 when the season ended, and we all thought that they were going to get killed by Boston, and then they made it a series until Rondo got hurt. So I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I think that's something along the lines of what the team is going to hope out for, is that maybe this team will perform better down the stretch. So I'm hoping that this is a sign of things to come for this Bulls team going forward, and hopefully that Minnesota game was the kick in the ass that they needed. Anytime you get 150 put up on you by a team like that, you gotta change something. So I think what Chuck was saying was pretty spot on when he was saying that all of these guys are NBA players, right? So,
Yeah.
Even though one team may look better, if you're not showing up, there's still NBA players on that end, and if they can make shots, and if they're playing hard, that's kind of what we saw with Detroit, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so hopefully good things to come in 2023 for the Bulls. Hopefully they start to get their act together. They are performing better in the clutch, and hopefully we get to see this team improve down the stretch. But that concludes today's Bulls Gold. We want to thank Chuck Swirsky for dropping by and making time for us. It was great talking to him. We also want to thank all our listeners who've been listening with us this year and listening with us every year. Thanks for rocking with us this year, and we will be back in 2023. For Salim Suterwalla, I'm Edward Schuler. This has been Bulls Gold, and we will catch you next time, Bulls fans.